Hey, everybody, and welcome back to season 5 of the Five Door Media podcast. This season, we are jumping straight into the money side of the cleaning business world: profits, cash flow, pricing, owner pay, everything you need to know about running a sustainable company, not just chase revenue. On today's show, we have a guest who is someone who has walked the road of building, scaling, and is now helping shape the future of the residential cleaning industry through software systems and acquisitions. Matt Ricketts is the founder of Better Life Maids and a leader in the residential cleaning space. Over the years, he's not only built his own successful company, but has also become deeply involved in the world of mergers and acquisitions, helping cleaning business owners think strategically about building businesses that are attractive, sellable, and scalable. In this episode, we're going to be diving deep into financial habits that drive profit, how to price and scale responsibility, and what every cleaning business owner should know if they want to one day sell their company or acquire another. Matt, welcome to the show. Welcome back. This is your second episode.
Yeah, great intro. Thank you, Drew. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Looking forward to this conversation. I know, and you were actually a guest on season 1, which was on the world of sales, and you dropped a lot of great value for our listeners on that episode. But in that episode, with the topic of sales, we talked a lot about finances. We talked a lot about mergers and acquisitions. So I'm like, man, a season on financials, we've got to have Matt back on. So I'm super excited to have you on. Let's get started. Let's set the financial baseline. We've seen many cleaning business owners succeed and fail. What financial blind spots do you see most often in this industry?
I mean, it's really hard. It's really hard to dig yourself out of a bad COGS model, like your cost of goods sold. I see people at like 65%, 70%, and you let it get to that point, and there is not a lot left. It's not uncommon. I see companies even letting their entire labor side getting up to like 80%. You can survive that. Like you just be super lean on some other things. That might include owner salary and a few other things. Um, but the main thing is like that COGS piece. When I see that over 50%, by by a point or two over 50%, I think then there's problems that start to creep in. And to normalize things, when I'm thinking of COGS, I'm thinking of like the direct line labor, all of the payroll taxes associated with that. I also include credit card processing because it is pretty much ubiquitous with the cost of delivering service now. Any other kind of payment costs, and obviously cleaning supplies and equipment. But I really don't really include vehicles or a lot of some people want to throw everything in there. All that stuff I'll have below, but you could make the argument to put it all in there. But when we're trying to equalize, I'm saying like those things at 50% and or below, and you're gonna have money to do other stuff. There are other industries. I was listening to Jonathan Poteshnik's podcast, and
Mm.
he's talking about all the things that he'd like for a healthy business. And he's like, I really like businesses where cost of goods sold are below 33%. I was like, wouldn't that be nice? It would be a lot easier to do this if we could charge enough to do that and give people a good living. Um, so we'll start there. Cost of goods sold though.
Sure. Yeah. So, what is that sweet spot for you? Like, what is a healthy COGS for a residential cleaning business?
I mean, under 50% is the number, but I think, I see people it starts with having a good comp plan, right? Like
Mm.
what you pay people and that creates alignment, but also keeps your cost of goods, in that sweet spot. So, um, there's some coaches that talk about you should give, 45% to your line labor with their comp plans. And I see a lot of those companies struggling because they've set aside too much. And the reason that they're saying 45% is because they're probably not charging enough. So to be competitive, they have to give 45% away. But that doesn't scale. You might do that to fix a problem. Like, all right, we're gonna put this comp plan in place, and we're willing to go there for a little bit, but we need to raise prices and get away from this. So um, that's a big thing. So getting the comp structure right, because line labor, I mean, dude, everything else is minuscule compared to that. I see people chasing dollars and, to save money on vacuums and save money on cleaning supplies and things like that. That stuff is like 1%.
Mm,
You can optimize that a little bit, but, on a half $1,000,000 a month budget, right? Like that's that's $5,000. The all the other stuff is $250,000. It's half, I mean, it's
mhm.
half the money. So to me, getting the comp structure right first will lead to pretty good things. So, um, I think you have to charge enough to make that make sense, but I think starting that in the 30s, mid or below. I mean, I see it just depends on how much you're charging and the marketplace you're in and all that stuff. But, if you're in like the 35 to 40% range, you can probably make it work um, to have enough money to reinvest in all the things to grow.
Sure.
Otherwise, you're going to be stuck. Um, you'll plateau a lot sooner if that's wrong.
Yeah. Pricing is an interesting topic in general too. I've obviously talked to a lot of cleaning businesses as well, and I'm asking them, what are they charging? We talk about obviously what's your average, ticket cost and things like that. And honestly, I hear things way across the board. I've heard as low as like $120 a cleaning all the way up to like 280 a cleaning for like that bi-weekly. What is a good strategy for people to figure out what they should be charging? Is it like a question of like reverse engineering of what your actual COGS are, your costs, and then what margin would be on top of that? But also like just the market and what the market can bear plays a big role into that as well. How would you suggest someone who maybe is lost when it comes to like coming up with how much they should be charging? How would you suggest them getting on the right track?
I think this is a great question. So first off, it comes up with like having a system that the bid jobs and getting the labor content correct on those jobs, and then measuring that, and then correcting if you were wrong, and not letting it just be like close enough, right?
Mm,
So if you bid a 4-hour job and you get it done in 4.5 hours, and it consistently takes you 4.5 hours, you need to go renegotiate with that customer or change the scope of work. Or you can measure that against other employees and see if it's a productivity issue of that employee, um, and normalize that. There's something inside of Made Central that actually compares all the productivity of all their employees, so you can actually be like, well, it would be 4 hours, but Susie is a little under production, so
mhm.
we're not going to mess with that customer's price. But I mean, getting that right. And so I see a lot of people base it on square footage. And to me, that doesn't make sense because square footage, it's a nice gouge of like, all right, this is the price. But pricing by room makes a lot more sense to me, and using square footage as a modifier, because the type of room that you're cleaning
Yeah.
has more to do with how long it takes, right? For interior cleaning. So a kitchen, right? If somebody wants to exclude a kitchen, yeah, that'll take 45 minutes to an hour off your clean. But if they want to exclude a bedroom and think that that's linear, it's the same size as the kitchen,
Yeah.
right? But that's 12 minutes versus an hour, right? So square footage kind of gets people in trouble in terms of production, because when they start modifying the house, they can't really get a custom price for people. I'm not a huge fan of it unless you have the right modifiers, and then it gets overly complicated. So, pricing by room always made more sense to me, and building it out from there, where it's like you have a base set of every house has the same kind of rooms. It's like it's going to have a kitchen, it's going to have a bathroom, it's going to have probably a family room or some sort of like room like that, some sort of eating area, like a dining room, you can call it that. It's gonna have a hallway. It's gonna have maybe a set of stairs. You kind of create a base model of what any house looks like, and then you can adjust the number of bedrooms. Then you can adjust the square footage. And I I have found that we have come up with a much more accurate model doing that. Now, can you do it with square footage? Yes. It just takes more modifiers, and it can get off easier when people make adjustments, and lead you to be charging too low in the labor content.
Mhm.
Uh, so long answer to say get your labor content right. However you get there.
Got it. Love it. So in your own business journey with Better Life Maids, was there a specific moment where getting clarity on the numbers completely changed the direction and the company was going. I've been hearing so many stories on this podcast as well as just other content. A business has no reason to think they're growing or growing in a healthy way until they know their numbers like the back of their hand. Was there a time of Better Life Maids where maybe you weren't on top of the numbers as good as you are now?
Yeah.
And do you remember that pivot moment?
I mean, I think 2018, 2018 would have been the pivot of when we really foundationally got a hold of this stuff. So, I had seen Castle Quick, which was Tom Tom Stewart's software for castle keepers, and I had basically come to the understanding that his company was selling jobs precisely, measuring and had, their pricing dialed in for each customer, whereas we were just kind of like in aggregate we're right, right?
Mhm.
We're in aggregate we're right, but there's customers we're making money on, there's customers we're losing money on, and I didn't really know what it was. So I asked Tom, "Hey, like, can I get on the software?" I ended up not being first because I negotiated with him on the price side, like being cheap, and so some other people beat me too. And I finally just conceded, like, all right, that's the price he's going to charge. Like, if he's going to do this, like, then he's going to have to charge a price. And so I finally conceded. So I'm just like everyone else, like in that sense. I want a good deal, but Tom held firm. Like, this is the price, Matt. If you want to do this, if I'm going to open this up to other people, this is what it is.
Yeah.
And shortly after getting on, I mean, we could see like there were jobs where we're making $100 an hour on, and we're probably not being fair to that customer. And there's jobs we're making $25 an hour. So starting to see that in every job every day and making those decisions quicker versus like running a giant spreadsheet at the end of the year and trying to sort this all out. Almost doing it daily with the dispatch board tool of Made Central. Ooh, my camera decided to move here. I'm not sure what it wants to do.
You're good. You're good. I think it looks great. You're good.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah, so all of that, that all that changed when we got the right technology in place. Um, Kind of another pivot that's happening now is we're just really understanding the unit level economics of acquiring customers on every channel, and even almost letting it go of what channel it comes from and just kind of blending it all together and saying this is our CAC. If we add another marketing source to it, it's really hard to track, right? Sometimes like
Mm.
direct mail versus Google versus Facebook, like all that's going to come together. But just kind of blend that CAC and make sure that if we add a channel, like we do one thing at a time. And for us, our CAC blended across all channels is $375. And that number sounds high to people, but I measure it differently than anyone else. Probably up, maybe not. Maybe people are doing the same way, but is in our softwares, it'll say we had 30 sales this week. But the truth is, I'll give a real example. One week we had 32 sales hit our software. And I'm talking to our CFO, our fractional CFO, and he's like, "Matt, no, you only had 20 sales. So when we calculate your CAC, and I was like, "No, 32." No, he's like, "No, 20 people for the first time hit your QuickBooks. That is a new customer." So your CAC is based on that, and all those other ones are reactivations. That's great, but this is what it costs to attract a new customer.
Mhm.
And that was a new way of thinking for me. And it's like, so then kind of figuring out what the contribution margin is per customer, like what do we actually make per customer over time? What can we truly afford to spend? I've modeled out where we could spend $1,100 and acquire a customer, and it'd be lean, but it's doable. I wouldn't suggest doing that, but it's do like
Sure.
the maths. If we were funded and just had unlimited money, we could probably go all the way to $1,100.
So you mentioned contribution method, and this is something we've been really educating ourselves on in our office, trying to educate clients on. Give someone who's maybe watching or listening the fifth grader lesson of the economics of contribution method and how you're using it and why it's important,
Okay.
especially in like the recurring revenue of the residential cleaning industry.
I might have to share something that might make this easier. So,
Okay.
I'll let me see if I have this spreadsheet open. I
'Cause
don't.
I think this is really honestly, this was not on my notes in any way for this conversation, but you brought it up, and I think it's really important.
Yeah, let me see if I can share a screen here. Okay, yep, I found it. Let me find the share button here and let's just take a visual of this. We'll walk through it. I know some people listen to this, some people
Sure, yeah.
let's see. So I'm going to share this IFM. Okay. So over here we've got a cumulative CAC. So basically what we're doing is marketing spend divided by new customers that hit QuickBooks. Cumulative purchases 15.6. That's 15.6 months. What I'm doing is just blending singles and recurring all into one and saying that anyone we acquire, it's just easier to measure it like this
Mm,
versus like, oh, recurrings are worth 30 and singles are worth one. Because singles aren't just one. Actually, singles actually hit quite a few times just
sure.
in anyway. So 15.6 months with a cumulative average order value of $334 per month, 49% cumulative gross margins. So lifetime revenue per customer of 51.95. Now, take that by that gross margin, and then that gives us a cumulative uh, gross profit, lifetime gross profit of $2,054. So we divide that by our CAC, and that gives us a 6.8x. That's pretty healthy. We think we could be 4.5 and still be healthy. The problem is even at 375, it costs us we spend $120 more on the first cleaning than we actually make.
Mhm.
But I'm willing to do that because it's like, well, by cleaning two, we're break even, right?
Yep.
Um, anyway, so doing the math on it, but at 565, it takes three cleanings to break even. At 1157, it takes like I think it's like eight or nine. It's just it's
Yeah.
way too lean for me. So you can kind of map this out. And then so then you get down to the contribution per customer, lifetime contribution. And all that is the gross profit, right? The lifetime gross profit minus how much it costs to acquire that customer. So what I'm talking about when I'm talking about contribution. That customer is gonna add $2,169 of gross profit. It's gonna contribute that over the lifetime of being our customer. If that if that's
100%.
something you're measuring.
Yeah, how long have you been has that been a focus of yours? I'm guessing newer-ish.
Newer this
Yeah.
year this
Okay.
year, I'm gonna stop my share here, but hopefully that was in
No, it's
useful.
super helpful. Yeah, super
Yeah,
helpful.
let's see if I can get my huh.
Should be able to just click the same button that you click to
Yeah, it's
share.
because 'cause I'm using 2 screens here. Yeah,
There you
alright,
go. Yeah.
yes.
So, tell me a little bit about how has that changed how you've looked at your marketing spend, how you've looked at, like, an acceptable, because I mean, there's probably so many people listening that hear $373 or whatever it was customer acquisition cost, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's so much money." But if you look at it, lifetime value, it changes that conversation, right?
Yeah.
So tell me how that journey, happened, and like how you've changed your mindset when it comes to a higher customer acquisition cost by looking at that lifetime value. Because so many people that we work with, they're looking at like, oh, it's just that first cleaning. But then you ask, wait, but how long are your people sticking around? Right. And then you do like the actual long term math, and it's a much better conversation. Right.
Well, I think so the question is when we started thinking about this, what's the thinking about behind it has always been there that customers are more than we think. What changed was about 6 months ago when we started blending the two together and saying recurring customers and singles aren't that different. A single customer just booked one cleaning, but it's like trying, and oftentimes they will have multiples over time. And I think we see it pretty regularly that like somebody that is like a single might actually be booking almost as much as once a month, but just doesn't want
Yeah.
to commit to a set schedule. They're paying our higher. We charge 75 an hour for somebody who's not on our schedule to book, and they're willing to pay the higher price for the convenience of just doing whatever they want to do. So, um, they're just harder to predict, right? Because we're used to like, all right, they're on our recurring schedule. We can kind of predict a little bit more. Uh, so modeling it out with everything together kind of changed our opinion on what we could spend. And honestly, I do think we are probably hitting some saturation in some of the channels, right? That we're using. So we're mostly using Google and Meta for our channels. And my take is you can only get as big as an audience will allow until that audience becomes saturated. So what I think is we're going to keep experimenting with running them up and seeing what happens to our CAC. And right now we're seeing it's trending as we've added more into Google. We're into like the $400 range this last month. Like it it has gone up, and our customer acquisition hasn't really like jumped up with it. So we're going to need to either find new channels or go into new markets. That's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, and I think of the world of AI coming in, I think there's gonna be, for the first time in a while, some new legit channels to play around with when it comes to marketing. No, that's super helpful. I mean, like I said, we're having those conversations a lot with our clients on looking at lifetime value and like looking at that instead of just that first cleaning. I mean, there's so many large companies, even outside the cleaning space, that this is their reality. I mean, when you do a subscribe and save on Amazon, this is exactly what they're thinking of, right? Like they probably know the math of how long, whether it's every 2 weeks, you get this discount. If you're ordering every week, you get this discount, monthly, this discount. It's the same concept, right? Like they are
I have
willing
four
to
bags of
purchase
creatine.
more revenue.
I got
Um
4 bags of creatine that I haven't used yet because it's on subscribe to save. It's like,
exactly, right?
I
But they just know how annoying it is, the effort to go cancel one of those things too. And like, obviously, you want to talk about a company with data. Amazon's going to have that data, but like, that's what these are other large companies. And it really just comes down to is like, how much are you willing to buy revenue for, right? For that lifetime of that customer. So thank you for pointing that out. That's really good. And I hope
I
people are hearing
do
that.
the math do the math on acquiring a company and, like, what you're paying per customer for an acquisition, right? So if you're paying 2.5 times revenue or 2 I'm sorry, 2.5 times, uh, EBITDA or profits, I'm sorry. Let's just use 3, it's easier math, right? If the company has, you know, 500,000 in profits and you're gonna pay, $1.5 million for that company, um, what is it you really paid per customer?
Hmm.
And you're buying the systems, you're buying the brand, you're buying a whole lot of stuff when you're doing that, but it's like typically those transactions are more like $1,000 a customer, and you're gonna have to execute well to get that buyback. It's closer to that cumulative CAC of like 11,157 that I showed you. I think that kind of number maths out for purchasing companies as well, is that you'd love to get it as low as
Yeah.
possible as far as like what you're acquiring their customers for, but they need to maximize that too. And yeah, anyway, the point being, there is a point where any of this doesn't make sense. Like, if somebody asks, I need 10x for my company, it's like in our industry, there's a couple of limits on that where it's like, yeah, banks are only gonna lend me 3. So where are we gonna get the difference?
Mm.
Like, I might be willing to give a company like a 4x if they were to carry a lot of the debt and like go and like let's say somebody wanted 5 million for their company. They had a big company. And that's like representing a I don't know, a 6x or something like that. For the right company, yeah, like if you'll carry that, like you carry 80% of the debt, I'll pay you 10% or 20% upfront, something like that.
Yeah.
And you're willing to finance it over 12 or 15 years. And then we could even do like a little bit of a profit split on top of that instead of interest, right? You have some sort of profit share interest instead of, you know, be a partner in something like that in terms of your retirement. You'd end up making a lot more, right? Instead of like just taking the all cash deal. But people want to de-risk their retirement years. So, they're only going to get what the market will allow in most instances of based on what financing will allow. Unless they can be creative and structure a longer term partnership. Um, so yeah, I think that $1,000 becomes kind of the lid on all of that, around there.
So true. And I think this mindset also helps out a lot in those moments where maybe you don't have a full schedule and you've got a truck with maybe half a week scheduled out on a Monday, and like you're willing to look at revenue in a certain way just to keep people working, to keep the trucks going, can keep the cars going, the cleaners working. Um, just that whole contribution method mindset can be a game changer for a lot of people. And like what you're talking about with M&A is like, yeah, there's so many different ways to skin a cat, right? And we'll talk more about that in a bit, but like there's many ways for these mergers and acquisitions, to be put in place. Let's talk about what a lot of people struggle with in the financial side of the business, and it's coming up with like systems and like financial rhythms. Like it's obviously it's a very hard thing to start and build and grow and scale a company. But especially in the world of financials, I'm learning um it's a hard thing to set time aside for. There's a mindset of just fear of like seeing the realistic numbers of your business and seeing where you're at. But you're obviously well into the software side of things for your finances for your company. What KPIs, dashboards, should every cleaning company be tracking regularly? Like what numbers matter the most and how should they be tracking those things? What should those financial rhythms look like?
I think there's certain things that are like on a weekly basis even, like, so you should be tracking what was your ad spend and what was your CAC for that week, right? So spend divided by new customers that hit your QuickBook, and then that's that's your a weekly number. Make sure you're capturing how many new customers each week,
Mm.
number of invoices, average invoice value, gross sales. All of that is trackable on a weekly basis, right? You can even get into some like marginal unit economics, um, in terms of kind of assuming lifetime gross profit of customers based on what percentage of customers were repeats. This may be too technical, but like, I mean, I'm looking at on a weekly basis our cumulative CAC, purchase per customer. And what's funny is I'm modeling that at like 15.4x, but right now we're like I'm looking in the data as I'm talking. It's like we're at 19.2 blended singles and recurring because we've gotten really good at holding on to customers longer.
Mm.
Um, the cumulative AOV is down a little bit, but so we could adjust that model a little bit, but we'd still be way more, and the cumulative gross margin is actually improving. Um, so we're seeing we're seeing a lot of good data that we can measure this almost weekly, based on some of this stuff, and you can track. I would even look at like what's hitting, expenses. What because again, it doesn't really make sense. Like, oh, you're not gonna have a P&L each week, but you want to be looking at this and being like, is there any unusual expenses that hit this week, or any unusually, especially things that are like really really high compared to what you would have projected for the month, right? Like, was there any unusually salary related expenses? Um, anything that you get big enough and a lot of stuff starts slipping through the cracks. I'm sure. I bet about 20 people have credit cards in my company, and like sometimes people sign up for subscriptions. It's like it's a general rule that only one card gets subscriptions, but like that doesn't always happen. So we're looking for that stuff regularly, like any new subscriptions. We have a software called SpendHound that looks for that and alerts us of any new subscriptions on any of our cards. Because that stuff
Oh yeah.
is there's such creep with it, where you could have thousands of dollars at a certain size of just kind of phantom expenses that you just miss. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, that's always been a good tip and trick. Like once a month, just go through that credit card bill and see what doesn't need to be there. And like literally, where you could be tens of thousands of dollars at the bottom line yearly that you would not have caught. Really interesting. Let's talk about scaling.
couple other
Or
numbers,
sorry,
just
go ahead. Yep.
bank accounts, just like what's in your bank each week, right? So just cash, accounts receivable. If you have that, you should know that number, have that reported every week. And that's really the big ones. Is like, you know, uh, would be you're looking at just some numbers are in a trend. And so like when you come to the end of the month and you're closing things out, you shouldn't really be surprised when you look at your your P&L, your balance sheet, and what's really going on in your statement of cash flows. And it shouldn't really be a surprise at that point. There's like a good weekly cadence to this.
For sure. Love that. Rhythms. I love that. Let's talk about scaling and just financial discipline that it takes to get there. Growth is exciting, obviously, but it's also risky, and a lot of times it's messy. What are the financial red flags that you could tell if you were inside of somebody's business? What are some financial red flags that you could see that they're possibly growing in an unhealthy way or growing too quickly?
Um, I think it's going to vary. Depends on their cash reserves. I mean, you could argue growing fast if you make the commitment to it for a period of time and do it in like a sprint kind of thing. You could make the argument you could go to zero or even be going backwards in terms of cash. Um, if you if you have a model that shows that the acquisition of those customers will pay off over time, because it is oftentimes a drain to grow fast. Like you're going to spend more to acquire a customer often than you make up front. Um, so I mean, just a giant red flag is already what we talked about. Was just if their cogs are out of line, right? That's almost unfixable. With anything below that is like you're just like chasing money, trying to save money on toilet paper and cleaning supply. I mean, it it's irrelevant at that point. Then, you can look at some other kind of key metrics are like, what is your indirect labor cost? Like if that starts to get above, I hear people like say 11% in this industry. I don't know where that number comes from. 10% is a nice number. Like indirect labor, 10%, right? So if you're a $500,000 company, $50,000 a month of indirect labor is probably in line. And I think if you have interest payments over about 5%
Mhm.
in these worlds of like you've taken on a lot of debt, that can really leave very little. Even if your EBITDA looks good, it can leave very little in a world where a lot of companies are struggling to make 10, 12% EBITDA, right? So um even though we always talk about EBITDA, you got to look at like how much of it is leveraged. And much more than 5% of um interest to revenue can be a sign of trouble in these businesses. um you got to sometimes you got to take some debt out to grow. You buy another business or do something like that. You've got debt to service, but you still need to make it worthwhile to run it for yourself. So that's one that I always look at, is if there's some debt service there, and how much is that in comparison to top line revenue. I think 2 or 3% is probably the healthy zone on that if you can keep it there. Five's kind of like stretched. You made a deal, and it's like, all right, we better grow this other acquisition, or else this was not worth it, right?
Mm.
You're doing that on the fact that you're going to hopefully grow that other whatever thing you did. So,
Love that. Let's talk about marketing spend. Obviously, this is a conversation we talk a lot about. And, there's a theory out there. Someone made this up. I don't know, kind of like you were saying with the 11%. I don't know who came up with it, but a lot of people say it. To stay steady, a company should be spending anywhere from like 2 to 4% on of top line on marketing. To grow some, you should be spending 5 to 7. And if you like really want to grow quickly, you're spending like 8 to 10%.
hmm.
What truth of that have you seen? What is a healthy, percentage of revenue to spend on marketing for a residential cleaning company? What have you seen in that world?
I think most people don't spend enough for what their ambitions are. I mean, like, uh, I think 8 to 11% is where I'm usually pretty comfortable. And the fact is, as you get bigger, you're going to need to spend. You need to spend more if you want to continue to grow, because at 1,300 recurring customers, we're going to lose at 4%. We're going to lose 14 a week. So just to stay where I'm at, I've got to get
Hmm.
14 new recurring customers every week, or else we go back,
Yeah.
right? So, and at 375, you start doing the math on that, but that's not all of it. I'm trying to get. I think we're trying to average our budget is Our weekly target is 21.32 new weekly customers. That's a mix of recurring and one times that have never seen us before. Well, we're trying to have 32 sales. So I've got to reactivate 11 like past customers to kind of come back as well. We got to hit our list, do all that stuff. What are we spending? So 7,500 a week, 30,000 plus, but that's before salary internally. I mean, we're
Yeah,
easily 10%. And I think, and we're, EBITDA wise, will be 17 or 18% this quarter. So could we be a little bit more profitable if you know, if I was trying to sell, I might scale that back a point or two. I might,
sure. Yeah,
juice that a little bit, but I I would argue that most of us aren't really in sell mode where we're trying to fix our P&L. Um, you know, I look at I look at those 20 customers as that's $100,000 a year that we sold every month. Not $100,000 a year, $100,000 of of lifetime value that we've added every single week. We just keep executing that week after week, right? Um, so on the backside of that, though, just as important is to increase the lifetime value of those customers, like execute really well. Acquiring them is one thing, but maximizing how much they're worth to your company is probably just as important. And
mm,
really, you should have that stuff dialed in pretty well before you go and be like, I'm going to spend XYZ on marketing just so you can lose them out the back door, right off the bat. So I don't know, I could wax poetic on the fact that why do all these companies that start these internet businesses where they're building this model of like house cleaning and all they're selling is one-time jobs and they're not able to build a recurring base. It's because operationally they're not executing well enough to keep these customers on a recurring basis. Is my opinion,
sure.
right? It's a culture thing, it's an operations thing, but they're not really set up for that. They're set up to market and sell
Hmm.
and not execute.
Many pieces to that puzzle to make it all work, right? Love that. Awesome. Well, let's talk about M&A. Let's talk about mergers and acquisition. I know this is a world you are getting more and more fascinated by, interested in, for multiple reasons. But you've been active in the M&A space, right? So why do you think we're starting to see maybe more consolidation in the residential cleaning industry? Like, why is this M&A conversation maybe at the highest it's maybe ever been in this space? And what do you see moving forward with that?
I still think it's very early and I don't think it's going to change what we're able to get for our businesses yet. It's just so early. So the conversation is why would they be interested in what we're doing and invest in this? So what we have is very unique. We have the keys to the house. We have high frequency recurring in the home service industry, and we're potentially the first one to see problems. I see us as a play for M&A for like these bigger companies is maybe they think they could bolt us on and increase the amount of wallet share that they get for all their other services. It has not been proven yet. People have tried or are trying to do that.
Mm,
That's one thing, but it hasn't really changed what they're offering, to pay. Like it's still risky because there's no contracts, it's so relationship driven that like when the owners change in these businesses, sometimes 15 to 20% of the customers just I'm going to try somebody I'm going to
yeah,
try somebody new. I really liked
like change.
Susie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like Susie. I don't know if I want to deal with these new people. And it's so funny. It's like the new people could be amazing, but just the change is gonna drive that. There's a lot of reasons that M&A is probably looking at this. The other thing is they're just tapped out of every other industry, so they're trying to explore another one. There's a problem though, is that they're usually looking for businesses that have $2 million of profits before they can really justify all the legal expense
Mm,
to to start rolling these things together. They need a platform company doing that, right? That would be the minimum platform company size. I don't know anybody doing 2 million EBITDA yet. There's maybe some folks that are close and I might be missing, Um, but but they're gonna either have to make the decision like, all right, we're gonna come down to a million. Like there's a few companies doing a million. Um, maybe more than I know. And if that's the level that they can come down and say we can build a platform on a million, we'll bring a few together at once and kind of roll it together. Things could change quickly. Um, and for the good, where people were used to getting, two times for their business, two times profit, maybe three times if they were a good operator. They might start seeing an extra turn or two, maybe four or five. They're not going to see 10x. There's going to be a few lucky people that get these really big exits because they're the platform companies. They're the ones that that have incredible brands, really good growth strategy, and the acquiring company is going to build this system around those people. And what they really want to acquire is the talent of that, like the CEO, the person to run it is why they're willing to pay multiple. So if you just have a good company, you want to be out. I don't think it's going to change the equation for you by some crazy amount. But an extra turn or two is worth a lot, right? Like so, you know, if you think about it, right? If you got an extra turn, like so instead of getting a three times, you got a four times, it would have it would have means, before you'd have had to grow your company an extra 30-40%. You didn't have to do that, right? You actually got an extra turn without having to grow. So I mean, the long story is there's going to be some winners that are going to win big. I don't think it's going to be for people that are just going to try and cash out. It's going to be for people that want to lead a bigger company and have the tools to do that. I think everybody that participates in it can win, but there's some pitfalls too with it because I don't think M&A understands how culture driven this
Mm.
industry is. They're going to come in with their playbook, and I think on some levels it might get ugly for the first companies that unless they have really strong leadership and like there was really good alignment with the leader and who's investing and really understanding that this is such a culture business, there could be some really big failures too. So there's some risk, you know.
So, I mean, kind of with what you were saying, a lot of people when they think of these conversations, and there's two sides of this, right? One where you're the buyer, and then one hopefully maybe you're trying to sell your company. Um, let's talk about, I guess, maybe both. But what are some things outside of just EBITDA? And you kind of leaned into it with like the culture comment. What are some things outside of just EBITDA or just the financial side that, let's say, if you're the buyer, you should be looking for or be paying attention to, but also if you're the seller, like
Yeah.
if you're selling your business, it's not just that bottom line number that could potentially get you a number or multiple or the couple turns as you called it. There's a lot of other factors that can go
Yeah.
into it, right?
So for me, I'm looking for a stat. So if outside of St. Louis, I'll buy anything in St. Louis, like if the math makes sense. But if I'm going to expand outside of St. Louis, which we're actively looking at now, I'm looking at established businesses that have been in business at least 10 years. I'm not looking for somebody that just built a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
I want like deep roots in the community, ideally maybe 15 or 20 years old, right? Like something that's been around and has some staying power, right? I'm looking for stable staff, like that they do not have 300% turnover, that this staff, there are people there that have committed to this place, in the office that the tenure there is very stable, right? So that matters, like, right, like looking for that. I'm looking for someone retiring versus somebody that's just trying to cash out, right? Somebody that's built something they're 65, 70 years old, and they just, you know, they want to transition to a different path at this point. Um, can we come up with something good together? Can we make, a reasonable deal? And are they really aware of what is reasonable based on what I can get in terms of access to capital, right? Like what is just because you want 10x, I can't do it, right? Because I don't have access to capital that would make that make sense. And um I don't have the time frame to make that debt like work, right? If I could take that on a 30-year note, that might work, but I might be 70 something years old at that. But like just
Yeah.
the time horizon doesn't make sense to for us all to kind of win. So you got to have people that are like really understand that like everyone has to win for this to work. And it has to be within the rules that the financial, system has kind of set for our businesses, and really the realities of our industry of like no contracts, no, you know, like really high turnover industry with like staff that you have to really nurture to keep all those things, and the risk of change, any of that stuff. So baking some of that in. Um, Markets matter too. Like
Mm,
if you're going into a market and this company is the biggest player in a market and might have 30% market share, I don't want that business because I don't think there's room to grow. I want to be able to grow it in that market. I'm looking at for somebody that has 1 or 2% market share max. So I like really highly fractured markets where I think we could actually expand this company. Nothing wrong with these companies that have built little empires in smaller towns, and they're the only player in town. But that might not be the company that I'm looking for. Like I think it makes sense and it's very sellable and it's a good business. It's just different than what I would personally think is appealing, is something in a mid market, or I don't know if I St. Louis is the bottom of bigger markets, like something like that. An area with high growth, but there's trade-offs in all those areas. Like, what is labor? I'd also look at model. Like, if you have a model with teams and you're going to go to buy a company with solos, different cultures. So, like, what's the culture of the company? How much of that is driven by business model, things like that. This stuff, for people that are doing window cleaning and all this kind of stuff, they're probably like, this stuff doesn't matter. Like, they clean windows, but the way you clean matters because there's oftentimes it could be, the labor pool you're driving could be all Hispanic. I don't know how to manage that, right?
mm.
Like there are companies in town that are like, if they came up for sale, I would buy them and I would run them as separate companies so I could just learn how to do that. Right? I would buy that as an experiment to get good at it, but I have no basis doing that out of town now because like that could just get away from me really quickly. I would not know how to engage with that labor force. So there's like a few of those kind of things. Um, Willingness for the owner to carry some financing, at least 20%,
Mm.
um, to make the numbers work. Those are all kind of things that I would look at.
I love what you said, and I think this is a really important lesson if you are the buyer side of these things. Just because it's a good company doesn't mean you should buy it. And I think what the step one, if you were diving into this world of like, I think I might want to acquire a company. I don't know. I've been practicing this new thing in my life, like just asking the statement of like, play it out. Let's say you do acquire a company. What do you want that first month to look like? Right. And like you play out what that situation should look like, because just because it's a good company, they have great reviews, the books look great, that doesn't mean it fits what you're looking for in acquiring a business. And I feel like you have certain things that you'd look for. Other people have certain things that they look for because we all run our businesses differently and uniquely. Find out what that situation would look like for you in your perfect world and make decisions off of that, not just because, oh, it's a good company, right?
I agree. I agree. There's such a fit that needs to happen there. And it's not going to be it's it's you're going to buy something and it's not going to be just cut and dry. It's going to go smooth and simple. Like
Yeah.
you're going to put in some work, especially in the front end, to stabilize this thing. Um,
You're not
and
buying a car,
yeah,
right? Like, yeah.
it needs to fit your life. And like, so I also would just be like, geographic constraints. Can you get there in 4 hours if you got to put out an emergency?
Mm.
You own an airplane, you can get anywhere in 4 hours. Most of us do not have that luxury, right? Like, we're not, even I, like, I am an airline pilot. I could fly the plane myself. Even I am like, I don't want a $200,000 a year expense of just sitting in a hangar, like, just so I can, like, at least not yet, because I can't justify how that's going to make me
Yeah.
$200,000. Um, that the pragmatic side of me of owning an airplane is just like the math doesn't math unless I am really doing this. And then yeah, and 4 hours becomes an hour, and I would still stick to that 4 hour, 5 hour timeline. Be like, can I be there in a few hours if I absolutely have to? Like something really important is going on. Like I need to get there because you may need to get there and deal with stuff. And if you bought something halfway across the world, I know a lot of us are running these remote businesses, and I get it, it works, but there are going to be like culture points where you like, what if you have a bunch of employees that are unhappy about stuff and they decided they want to start a union? God forbid. You need
Sure.
to you need to get in there and talk to them in person. The Zoom meeting's not going to cover like the logistics of that situation. And the like,
Can't do union negotiations over FaceTime. That's
yeah,
not like
you
an
gotta be
appropriate place.
super careful about all that stuff. And like, and God forbid that's you get big enough. These are all things that like can and will happen eventually. Like your employees will be mad about something that you didn't really see coming, and um, and you're fighting off like a union negotiation for whatever reason. I mean, I have friends in the industry that have gone through this. This is not just a hypothetical thing. Like, it's just changes in pay structure that employees just weren't aware of or didn't understand,
Yeah.
and you know, so I think geography matters a lot in these situations.
You mentioned something else, and I want to touch on this just a little bit more. You prefer to acquire someone or deals where the person is retiring rather than just trying to get out. I think I could probably explain why, but just a little bit on what the differences are in those two situations when it comes to like the seller. Why does that matter to you?
Yeah, I think it's more of a motivated seller, like to I mean, so if you're out researching deal flow and like you hit like a 30-year-old that's ready to quit, first off, the business isn't aged, probably. Um, there's there's a lot of things about that seller that like they might not be the best seller in terms of like they want to probably hit a home run on this deal, or
Yeah.
whereas the retiree is just more pragmatic, is like, I'm done. I've made my money. I can't do this forever. And they're being pragmatic because like they realize there's a time clock on them, and if they wait too long to sell, they really devalue their businesses. There is a moment in time where a business is worth the most or most it ever could have been, and as the seller gets older, that moment can tip past really quick. I've seen it happen several times where like somebody just hung on too long, had a health crisis, did not have a team in place that could handle like the absentee, and what could have been $1 million sale became a fire sale. You know, so I don't want to have a fire sale with these people. I want them to get to extract good value and have a good life, but I also don't want them to wait too long, right? And like be regretting that they waited too long. So that's part of it. Is I'm looking for people that are they're getting ready to retire. They have reasonable expectations. What is your thoughts? What do you how do you think about it?
I was gonna say the same thing. Multiple points you made. A Usually if someone's looking to retire, which we're talking about the traditional route of retirement, right? Where someone is like that 55, 60, 65 years old, the odds are that the company has aged with them, right? You're not getting someone, even if somebody was, 35 and they started it when they were 20, I mean, that's still a unique situation because 65, 70, that's a seasoned company that has withstood many tests of time. But also I think you're right on, if somebody's just cash grab, they're looking for something quick. I could see the process of that transaction process being much more stressful, because they're just like, no, I just want it done. This is what I want. You know what I mean? And I think you said the word reasonable. I think that 65, 70-year old, retiree, they're more reasonable, right? They're level headed, I think, a lot more than probably that young seller would be. So yeah, I think we're on the same page. I think if anything, I think it would just make the process of the transaction honestly, but just much more enjoyable, which it should be, right? Like
It should
if
be a
you're
win. It should be a
65,
win-win.
70, if you're 65, 70, like you want it to, if you're the buyer, you don't want it to feel, I would feel awful if I bought someone's business that they had built for 30, 40 years and they didn't enjoy the process of selling it. I would feel guilty about that, right? So you want it to be a good transaction emotionally, financially, for both people involved. And I feel like if someone's just trying to get some cash, that doesn't work out that way.
I think legacy matters in these situations too, is like, how are you gonna take care of their people?
Yeah.
How are you gonna take care of this business and grow it? Like, so part of my strategy would be in most of these instances not to do a full rebrand, would be we would offer all the back end, but their brand in the local marketplace
Oh man.
would sustain, and that, brand of brands, does anybody really care who Better Life is outside of St. Louis? I don't think they do. The only thing would be easier for us just to spin up all the assets and stuff like that that we
Yeah.
have. I might change the color of their uniform so that it looks similar in terms of like, marketing and stuff like that. But we might just be whatever they are in that marketplace because mostly because we're respecting the legacy of the person that we bought this from. I think that is really important. Legacy is really important to people that are retiring.
100%.
Uh, so you got to respect that part of it. There's always egos involved in any of these things. Um, so generally though, as people get older, their egos tend to be, they're still there, but they're more,
They're
uh,
level-headed a little bit.
yeah, their self-awareness is higher of what they really want,
Yeah.
and what they want to do with the rest of the time. You can make such a win-win too with people, especially if they'll do seller financing. It's not, they're brokers. If they're dealing with brokers and be like, oh, always take all the money. But it's like they could get two extra turns by spreading out the money and interest and time. And if their goal is to maximize the cash in retirement, you can really make really good deals with people you know, that are again win-win for both parties. And it I think again, it's the seller profile that I'm looking at, but if somebody's looking to sell, I'll look at it. But generally, I like those established businesses, and I like the motives of the seller a little bit better.
Huge point too when it comes to, like, keeping the logo of the brand. Don't forget that's a huge part of what you're paying for as well. I mean,
Yeah,
any brand that has survived 40, 45 years, that's a good brand. And I'm not just talking about logo and things like that. I define brand as what people think about you when they see your logo. And if somebody survives that long, that's a good brand. So that's a part of that acquisition. So that's actually a really good point too. Like, don't just come in and change everything overnight just because the books look good. I mean, that's where you could go and get to a lot of trouble really quickly, where you're going to lose not just 10 to 15% of customers that you were talking about, but maybe even more. They like that 35, 40-year-old brand. That's why they were a customer of it. They don't want things to change too much.
there was a really good brand here in St. Louis that was acquired a few years back or 10 years back, and when she was ready to retire, and I kicked myself for not figuring out how to make that one happen. But I would have left that brand up, and the new company came in and retired that brand with a brand from out of town, and it never culture wise, like it never aligned. And I think that's
Mhm.
another thing is like, keeping the culture in place. Like part of the playbook has to be to keep those employees. And like I would say like a massive retention bonus for any key employee, like based on time and seat, like, not just time that they've been in the seat, but like, 1 month, 6 month, 1 year kickers, keep these people in place, reduce turnover and churn, at whatever cost you can when you make these deals, because it's already going to cost you some customers just for doing that.
Yeah.
And then if people start leaving, then yeah, you're in trouble.
Such good points. Love this. Really good conversation today. All right. I've been ending these episodes with, if you had 60 seconds to speak to a cleaning business owner who's hustling but not seeing profit, they're terrified of looking at their books. They ignored their bookkeeper's phone callers like debt collectors. They hate this part of being a business owner. You got 60 seconds with them. What do you do to motivate them in like the first steps they should take?
Um, you got to embrace you got to embrace the financial side and the KPI side of this business. It's you know delivering service is only so much. You have to optimize like what happens financially for this business. So I would say I'll plug my accounting company. It's called Weekly Accounting. It's fractional CFO plus weekly accounting. Accounting might be, just the books might be $800 a month. It's very reasonable for that. And then if you add fractional CFO on, you might be at $2,500 a month all in. for a much higher level of service, really clean books, really good data on a weekly basis. So you can really start uncovering why you're scared of the numbers. What is the things that are breaking your business? And I'll go back to the beginning. It almost always starts with that first part of the financial profit and loss statement is the is the gross profits. Is like there's just not enough gross profits to cover all the other stuff. So it almost always comes back to that.
It's always full circle. Love that. Very cool. Well, Matt, hey, thanks for being a part of this conversation today. I think it's going to be a powerful one. You always bring very practical advice to a lot of people on the show, so I appreciate it. Before we wrap up, where is the best place for listeners to maybe connect with you or learn more about what you're doing at Better Life Maids, or even in your work and acquisitions? I think this episode might stir up some interest in the M&A world that maybe didn't exist before.
LinkedIn is great. I'm on there. I just opened it now. I've got like 11 notifications. I'm on there instead of Facebook these days. I like the conversations there a little bit more than I like. I used to like to know what your pet was doing and all that stuff, but like Facebook, like anything else, has become everybody's opinion on everything. Whereas LinkedIn has stayed pretty professional. So I've moved a lot of my social time there.
Very cool. I am fully here for all your pet photos, specifically dogs. So I'll take them if Matt doesn't want them. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you for being on this episode. If you have found this episode helpful, maybe share it with a cleaning business owner who's thinking about growth, whether that's through stronger financial disciplines or through buying and selling companies. Share this with them. If there's one thing I do know about this industry, that it is like the tightest knit industry I've ever experienced in my entire life. So you probably know 5, 6 people that you could share this episode with and start conversations off of the conversations that we've had today. So, because we do know at the end of the day, whether you're building or scaling, or building to scale or building to sell, the numbers are going to tell the story. So, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.